Hello, BookTube. This is Alan. I'm here to do a book review. And the book that I'm going to be reviewing is one that I read an advanced copy of, an ebook, and I liked it so much that I went ahead and purchased a physical copy. And it's also one that I had to get the physical copy from overseas instead of here in the United States, because it was due out here in the United States on May the 5th, and I don't know if it is or not. Anyway, this is Philosopher of the Heart, The Restless Life of Soren Kierkegaard. This book is put out by Penguin. It's a biography, and it is written by Claire Carlyle. Claire Carlyle is a reader of religion and philosophy at King's College. There's a lot of blurbs in the front. And it actually came out and first published in 2019. It was published in Penguin Books by 2020. This is not the book that you would think about Soren Kierkegaard, because Soren Kierkegaard is called the father of existentialism. Now, let me give you a brief introduction, or a brief statement of what excuse me, existentialism is. And it's very hard to define what existentialism is, because in existentialism you have a being and a non-being. In other words, a tree can exist and not exist at the same time. A horse can exist and not exist at the same time. God can exist and not exist at the same time. Therefore, man is what he feels, and there is no real point to anything. There will be a point to this, I assure you, don't worry. So you have a wide range of subjects when you're coming to existentialist thought. There was three actually on this maybe midrash. Actually, let me make a point here. I was going to use this book for maybe midrash, but I had already used a nonfiction work, and this was another nonfiction, and I didn't think it would be proper to use it for maybe midrash, so I put something else there for my fiction for maybe midrash, and it was horrible, and I apologize for those who had to suffer through that, and I have since deleted that video. So let's go move on. As soon as I get my notes here. There are 3 videos on maybe midrash ever posted. One by Matthew Mayberry Book Club, the other one by Lukash at Total Pretentious, and the third one was Steve Donahue. They were going back and forth over agnosticism and atheism. Matthew Mayberry Book Club mentioned the fact that God is dead. Well, he didn't explain where that concept come from. It actually came from existentialist thought, when Friedrich Nietzsche said that God is dead. And Friedrich Nietzsche is an existentialist philosopher, which the word philosopher doesn't make any sense to an existentialist, because they would say that philosophy doesn't exist. And so during the 1970s, you had a famous Time magazine. It was entirely black, and there was a in red was this front cover. In red says God is dead, and that's it. And then later you saw pictures of the subway wall which says God is dead, and then underlined Nietzsche, and then someone came along and said that Nietzsche is excuse me, Nietzsche is dead, God. So that proves to everyone that the words of the prophet are written on the subway walls. So this argument between our debate actually over agnosticism and atheism actually is not a very good argument, because both agnosticism and atheism actually are branches from the same tree, which is existentialism. And you have existentialists. Okay, let me mention this for a moment. If a person has a dilemma, he can either go one way or he can go another way. Let's give an example. Example would be if someone wants to go to the war to help defend his country, because it's duty and honor and everything else. But he also has a sick mother at home. There's no one else to take care of his sick mother. So he's either goes duty and honor, or he can, or loyalty, or he can go stay at home with his mother. What is his decision? The existentialist said that both of them are right. Both of them are right, because he has that choice, and he has that both are right. That it doesn't matter the choice that he makes, because man is what he feels, and there's no real point to anything. There are several things that come up with that. And what happened to this, how they get to the point of existentialist. And Clara Carlyle points this out in the book. See, I told you there was a point to this. Clara Carlyle points this out in the book, is that the Reformation gave way to the individual, and gave the individual free rein to make up his own mind on the issues of the day. And this free rein, where you don't have creeds or dogmas or beliefs weighing you down, that you're able to make up your own mind. And this goes on throughout history. Whenever you have a revolution, a reformation, that there springs out of that this free thought. As you got rid of the feudalistic society, or another society that was shackling your free thought, you're now free to decide for yourself. And before the Reformation, what was shackling the people was the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire, with this creeds and the dogmas and this out there, because the church at that time was guilty of ignoring society and the issues of which were crying out for a Christian response. And they ignored it. And the faith is irrelevant, not because it's actually is, but because it refuses to apply and search in light to the things that matter. Excuse me. So existentialism breeds on suffering, despair, guilt, fear, dread, and death. And you can see that in a lot of the books that have been written. Within Catcher in the Rye. That was in Slaughterhouse 5. That was in all of Dostoevsky's works. You can see that in Fight Club. And you can see that in The Great Gatsby. And you can see that in Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep. And you can see that in The Fault in Our Stars. Yeah, this loss, this dread, this annihilation, this absurdity, this nothingness. And you can see that in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, which Brian and Bookish reviewed. And yes, bearable lightness of being. The last word, being, comes from being and not being, which is a existentialist thought. Okay, said all that, and there is a point to this. I'll get to it in a minute. Let's said all that. Let's go to the Philosopher of Heart, Claire Carlyle, The Restless Life of Soren Kierkegaard. There are several points to this book that she makes. She goes over and over again. And first one is a lady by the name of Regina Olsen. Regina Olsen was a lady who, in Copenhagen, Denmark, she was betrothed to Soren Kierkegaard. And they sent love letters back and forth. And they went, and so love letters back and forth, and they were going to get married until Soren Kierkegaard hightailed it to Berlin, breaking off the marriage. But all the rest of his life, Soren Kierkegaard kept Regina Olsen in his mind all the time, and even wrote her letters back and forth. And at the very end, he still had his engagement ring. He still kept it and still kept wore it. The next point that she makes, or key point that she makes, is the church in Denmark. Even though the church in Denmark was Lutheran, it was a state religion. The politics were Lutheran. The church was Lutheran, as I said. The school was Lutheran. All the thought was Lutheran. And you had, that time, you had different pockets of Lutheranism. Germany was Lutheran, state religion, and all these state religions. And that's why when the United States Constitution was made, which talks about the amendment, number one, which says we will not have any religion, organized religion, and they knew that over in Europe, the countries were like a state religion, and Poland wasn't. Poland didn't have a state religion, and so the king in Poland said to the Jews, "Oh, you can live here." That's why there were a lot of Jews living in Poland when Germany invaded Poland. and Germany was Lutheran also. So you had the church or the state. You had Regina Olsen. The next one comes from Genesis chapter 22, which I'll read. Where are you? Genesis chapter 22, which states, let me get another version. Very small print, I can't see. This is the Robert Alter's translation, the commentary. Genesis 22. And it happened after these things that God tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham. And he said, hey, here I am. And he said, take now your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go forth to the land of Moriah and offer him up as a burnt offering on one of the mountain which I shall say to you. And Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took it 2 lads with him, Isaac his son, and split wood for the offering, rose, and went to the place that God had said to him. On the 3rd day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from afar, and Abraham said to his lads, sit you here with the donkey, and let me, the lad, walk ahead, and let us worship and return to you. And Abraham took the wood for the offering, put it on Isaac his son, and took in his hand the fire and the cleaver. And the 2 of them went together. And Isaac said to Abraham his father, Father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, here's the fire and the wood, but where is the sheep for the offering? And Abraham said, God will see to the sheep for the offering, my son. And the 2 of them went together, and they came to a place that God had said to him. And Abraham built there an altar, and laid out the wood, and bound Isaac and his son, and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham reached out his hand, and took the cleaver to slaughter his son. And the Lord's messenger called out to him from the heavens, said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not reach out your hand against the lad, and do nothing to him, for I know that you fear God, and you have not held back your son, your only one, from me. And Abraham raised his eyes and saw, and looked, a ram was caught in the thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up as a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Yahweh Rirah, as it said, to this day, on the mount of the Lord there is sight. And the Lord's messenger called out. Okay, we'll end it right there, because Soren Kierkegaard struggled with that passage I just read throughout his entire life. He could not understand it. He could not understand what was Abraham thinking, and what was he going to say when he got back home to Sarah, his wife, about where Isaac is, the promised seed, the one that God had promised to them in their old age, because Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 99. And he kept thinking of that throughout his entire life, how this exists. There are modern Christian thinkers who believe that Abraham believed in the resurrection. That's why he wanted to go slaughter his son. He believed in the resurrection. I don't disagree with that, but I don't know where they get that from. Uh, it's I think that that point is wrong because a lot of Christian theologians will say that because they believe that Christ is in everything, and that they believe that Isaac was basically a reincarnated or some type of Christ, and that the cross and the crucifixion are the same as. Right? I don't know how they come up with that. I haven't studied, but anyway, that was one of the things. Another key point that went through this entire book about Abraham and the sacrificing of his son Isaac. So moving on here, let's go to and spiritual struggles. Not only was Kierkegaard going through the struggle about trying to understand the passage I just read from Genesis 22, he also is struggling about, well, it goes back to what I said about the church, where the church has become, in Copenhagen, a type of easy believism, where you're just going through the motions, and where the people were just not paying attention to what is said in Scripture, not really listening to the words. And it's like in the book of the Old Testament book, I think it's Malachi, where the Lord says to Israel, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this in a moment, I abhor your sacrifices, and your aroma is a stench to my nostrils. The aroma from these. And he's telling his people, Israel, to pay attention to sacrifices. Not just blatantly do it. And that goes back to what was going on during the Middle Ages, when you had a feudalistic system, and you had the dogmas and the creeds and the confessions, and this kneeling, this penitence, was that people were not paying attention, and the church was not paying attention to the people. And so you get rid of that. And Kierkegaard struggled with this about how to live as a Christian in this world. And he struggled at this point. And because he's writing books, he wrote one called Faith and Reason. And then it comes, and here it is, I'll just read it to you. During 1844, Kierkegaard's devotional reading, including True Christianity by Johann, 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 Johann Arndt, Arndt, the Lutheran theologian whose literary work sowed the seeds of pietism and then nourished its growth. In the first years of the 17th century, Arnott published new editions of medieval works, including Thomas A. Kempis, An Invitation to Christ, and the sermons of Jonas Tower, True Christianity, his own guide to holy life. Went through more than 100 editions between 1605 and 1740. Inspired by mystical insights and ascetic practices of his Catholic forebears, who had themselves studied, lived, and elaborated St. Paul's theology within their monasteries, Arnott urged generations of Protestant Christians to purify themselves of practicing self-denial and dying to the world. In True Christianity, Kierkegaard found a spiritual teaching, which deepened his own ambivalence towards the world. Christianity is truly in the world, but not of the world, he read in this own devotional book. He lives indeed in the world, but it is not love it. The world's pomp, honor, pretense, glory, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life is for the Christian a dead thing, a shadow of which he pays no attention. So the problem is that in the church in Denmark, which is the state religion, as I said earlier, is that the people there in the church, the Christians there, were acting like members of the world. That they were loving the world instead of loving God. Instead of coming to Christ and giving up everything. They were they were going through them, just the emotions, as I mentioned. I'm getting on 27 minutes. I better hurry. And they were living this life, everything. And Kierkegaard saw that. And he saw that the way they were acting. And he called them out on it. And he said, and it says here, within days, Kierkegaard drafted a scathing attack on Martinson's memorial discourse. And this was a discourse because the bishop of the church in Denmark, where Kierkegaard grew up in, and became his mentor, so to speak, but he had a falling out. It said, Bishop Minister is a true witness. With this, that's someone who unconditionally suffers for the doctrine, which faith leads him into spiritual truth, anxieties of soul, and the torments of the spirit. To prove Martinson's error in linking Leinster to the apostle, Kierkegaard cited the first letter to Corinthians, where Paul was particularly blunt in contrasting worldly power and arrogance with the humiliations of Christian discipleship. You are held in honor, but we are in dispute, Paul wrote to the Greeks in Corinth. We are hungry and thirsty. We are poorly clothed and beaten. We are homeless. We have become like rubbish of the world. Kierkegaard accused Martinson of playing Christianity entirely in the same sense as a child plays at being a soldier, by removing all the dangers. Kierkegaard continued his denunciation as he upset his relatives. Said that it's a critique of worldliness, insisted the most radical demands of Christianity. This was a religion that, as its inheritance, let go of its physiological trivia with most human beings build their lives, commerce, marriage, begetting children, amounting to something in the world. The cornerstones of the respectable society that now passed itself off as a Christian community. He blamed women for imposing on men all the nonsense of poor finitude and deplored the aggressive egotism of the wife and mother who loved himself, but loving those who are not her own. And he continues to go on until that Christianity there is basically a myth, and that it's not true Christianity. So let me go back to what I said at first. I stated that Kierkegaard is the father of existentialism. Existentialism, I briefly said, let me get this back up, that man is what he feels and there is no real point to anything, and that you have this being and non-being. And the existentialist channels this individualistic stress and hope. So what I said about earlier about existentialism, does that sound like something like from Kierkegaard? No, it doesn't. In fact, there is something called Christian existentialism. And look at my notes here, so if I can find it. Christian existentialism comes from the gentleman that I just mentioned, that Johann Art, and it also comes from the writings of St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, where you have a genuine form of Christianity, where you have a personal relationship with God, you have aspects of the divine, you have a personal aesthetic choice in the matter. And it deals with three things: greed, humility, and love. And that's it with the, and that's all. And that's what Claire Carlyle points out in this book, Philosopher of the Heart, The Restless Life by Soren Kierkegaard. Enjoy it. Thank you very much.